even beginning to think about a bucket list. And then taking another moment to reflect on something that you're writing on this bucket list. And then wondering what's going to happen with these papers. And noticing the pile of papers that are on the table right now. A lovely pile of our bucket lists. So this is how the piece that we've created in the attic ends. So I just wanted you to have a little bit of an experience of the piece. And also, I will ask your permission to use your sheets for the future of the project, because it's an ongoing project, which means that we'll make hundreds of copies of your list and we'll add it to the set. And you will be joining, I don't know, there's probably already 200 people, bucket lists that we've collected. And I'll show you some pictures in a moment. While I'm talking, I'm going to pass out 3 things that you can glance at, and then I'll describe the project a little bit while going through a few images, and then give Daniela also time to share, because she joined us on this journey. So I'm sending out a little brochure about the piece. Some of the images are repeated. A little flyer about this specific tour that we did. And then a book about a company that this project has allowed us to have deepening contact with this company. I'm hoping to bring them to UMD, and they've already invited Daniel and I to work on a piece that myself and the director of the company would direct, and then I would also perform in it with his partner in the company. This company, Ensayo Alberto, is they're a very political theater in Rio, and more political than I could ever possibly imagine being. So they really inspire me, and they have a space in Rio that is it used to be a boat warehouse, like for big boats on the ocean, like huge Navy boats and whatnot. It's this huge space. It's incredible. And I trained, as some of you know, in France with Jacques Lecoq and Serge Martin, and I did a lot of work at Bouffe du Nord with Peter Brook, and that's where I did my training with Auguste Bois when he was kicked out of Brazil. And I had the chance to do some training at Cartoucherie with Théâtre du Soleil and Ariane Munchkin. And Ariane Munchkin has blessed this space because she says it reminds her of Cartoucherie. And so there's a lineage connection when I walked into that space. So this is just a book of their work. I'm just going to pass it around while I'm talking if you want to glance at it quickly. So I don't know how I do this. What do I do?
Tap the space bar.
Tap the space bar?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the attic, taking a moment to remember is it's a performance of sorts. It's more a conversation. It's a piece of performance, engaged performance, that is an invitation for a community to have a conversation. And the conversation specifically with this piece is about life and death. We chose the subject of death because we say, the group of people that collaborated on creating this project, death is a great equalizer. It's something everyone has in common. And, but it's something that we don't think about. Gertrude Stein has this great quote, "No one gets out of this world alive." And I really believe, and I've had many discussions with Christina Banalapoulou about this, that the essence of tragedy, and then the translation of that into performance tragedy, is the idea that we have to come to this place of recognizing that we are mere mortals, and we walk around pretending that we're not. And then moments happen to us in our lives where we are met with, uh-oh, and then what happens? So this piece is exploring that. It's about a woman in the last 5 minutes of her life. There's two people playing this woman, and there's a back and forthness about a part of this woman that embraces, okay, I'm ready to go, and a part of her that's very resistant and tries to hold on to memories and plans of things that she has to do before she goes, and the negotiation between the two of them. So I'm performing in this piece, and a movement-based performer, and the other performer is a singer, more singing-based performer. And we do this piece, and then we open up this wonderful conversation with the audience. And every place we've gone where we open this discussion, my heart just becomes so warm, hopeful about humanity, actually, for the depth and breadth that people share. And it was actually Sherry Parks, who was an associate dean in ARHU and now is at MICA in Baltimore, helped us frame how we do the discussions. And so how the audience sits, how the discussions are led, are all part of the performance. And so with this ICCPR grant, which I'm so grateful to have received, we went to Brazil for the second time this summer, and we were invited to perform in Brazil. The arts in Brazil are a little more political than I've experienced in the States. It's a mess. Brazil's just a mess right now, and people were very passionate. It was very dangerous. We were only in Rio this year, and it was. They have these old post offices, correios, and they've turned them all over the country, all over Brazil. They've turned them into cultural arts centers. So we were invited to create this piece in one of these centers in Rio, and then a center just outside of Rio, which in and of itself is very interesting because Rio was much fancier, and Niterói was, some days when we were teaching a workshop, people had to be late because there were gunshots in the favela where they were living. They were on the favela are the slums that go up in the hills, and they were living between the favela and like public housing, but it wasn't safe for them to come to the workshop. So these were all these factors that we were dealing with, and gathering these people together to teach workshops and then exploring the material of the piece and then presenting the piece. The bucket lists, the set is 2 feet thick of bucket lists, which we work with. And now your lists will become a part of our set. This is a moment of discovering something important that needs to be done on a bucket list. And again, the cherished holding on to something that, what do we hold on to? That's you can see all the lists and the 2 characters sitting there. There's some clothing that live as well amongst the bucket lists, specific clothing that represents major moments in this person's life. We've interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that are dying or their families that are dying, and part of touring in the attic all over the world is finding out, asking the same questions everywhere we go, and discovering again this common denominator that it doesn't matter what country, what language, this subject brings the same journey. So we're trying to find a universal archetypal language that can cut through political differences, language, culture, and help us remember that we are all fellow humans. Just letting you sit with images of the piece. It's very intense to perform a piece on layers of bucket lists.
Yeah.
So this is one of the spaces. This is Espacio de Correos in Niterói. And another thing that Daniel, my co-director, and I like to play around with is adapting everything we do to a specific site. And we always work architecturally with environments that we're working in, and then create, because then we're creating spontaneous conversations with people walking by, and engaging them in the material of the piece. And we choose spaces, and then I create characters to be the character of the space that we're in. So that's the space in Niterói. That's inside the space. That's the space in Rio that we performed in. Part of one moment of the piece.
Leslie, can I ask, is it scripted and scripted up to a point, and then
It's
then
completely
questions
scripted.
afterwards? What's the structure of the performance?
The structure, I don't quite understand how to answer that.
If I were to attend the performance, what would I see? And
You
then
would
how
think that you
participate?
were seeing for a few moments a performance that, but a little bit you'd feel different in the space. You'd walk into the theater and be immediately taken into the space and not know exactly what you were being taken into, but you would feel a part of, because you'd feel a part of the space. You wouldn't feel removed from the performers. You'd go through the journey with the performers. It wouldn't be strange afterward to be writing and then engaging in a conversation. And I'm going to have Daniela speak more to that in a moment. This is the space, the Centro Cultural de Correos in Rio, and it was lovely to be greeted with a big poster. So we had fun with that. That's the space. There's beautiful, beautiful spaces, also on the waterfront. And then that's just, here we are, just a little speck of moment in Rio. We were quite grateful to receive this money, to be able to travel to Brazil as a company, to be able to experience living together as a company, navigating the current events of Brazil, needing to practice being an ensemble, sharing that experience with the students that came to the workshop, sharing that experience with the people that we met in our building, with all the people that we met in performance and in workshop. We have been invited to go and do a countrywide tour to all the Correos cultural centers. We can't quite navigate that immediately, but the invitation is open, so the grant was successful to leading to other things, and definitely with the company and trying to figure out some way to create this collaboration, maybe using the classroom. They'd be happy to teach through there. They are so strict. They make me look like I'm, baking cookies for you when I'm teaching. But it's a kind of strictness with training that I think is good for you all to experience. And then working multilingually is also really, from the background I come from, and it's really, really wonderful. And Daniela was our stage manager, production coordinator, and because she speaks Portuguese and comes from, her family's from Brazil, I asked her to be one of the facilitators of the talkbacks. I thought that would be a really wonderful opportunity for one of our students, and I would like her to share.
Hi everyone. Yeah, like Leslie said, my whole family is from Brazil. I'm first generation from here, so I kind of grew up around the culture. I always went back to Brazil often throughout my childhood, and quickly noticed that the conversations I have amongst my family are not ones that I had in the talkback with people. Weirdly enough, my family doesn't talk about death that often. I don't know if yours do. So it was very interesting for me to hear the perspective of death in the Brazilian culture versus like death here. Like the idea of bucket lists are so overblown in the United States. There's Pinterest boards about it. Whereas in Brazil, because of media, the younger generations have heard of it, but the older generations have not like come to that idea of what a bucket list means, like the idea of putting down on paper. Like they always like, oh yeah, we've thought about it, but we never thought about putting it down and writing it down. So hearing that from the audience and hearing the differences amongst the generations and their view of it was very interesting. To answer more about Drew's question, the format of the performance is kind of, there's a soundscape because there's a sound designer, and there is dialogue and there is, I guess, a script, but within that there's so many moments of waiting, so many moments of just movement that is so specific that as an audience member you're forgetting what's kind of like where you are and who you are and what is happening. The first time I saw it was before we toured, which was in Baltimore, and I just remember being like transported because with the soundscape and the waiting, it's such an experience you've never experienced before, and usually the lights are up on the audience, that there isn't even a light barrier between the performance space and the audience, which in the talkbacks we asked, like, what did that do for you? Similarly with language, the piece is in English, and so in Brazil, a lot of Brazilians know English because it's kind of taught in schools there, but a lot of Brazilians also don't, depending on the school district. So we asked, so one of them actually asked, like, oh, was it on purpose that you left the lights on, that you left them on? And we were like, yeah. And they're like, okay, yeah, we got it. Like, we didn't feel like there was a barrier ever. We felt like we were part of it. And immediately following the performance, we get up and start passing out the bucket lists for the audience to fill out. There's not a, and then the soundscape keeps going. So there's never a moment for the performance to end because it hasn't. And they feel that as well. They felt that as well. They made a comment about like the fact that you immediately included us, felt like we were always part of it. We always felt that we were, and these were things that they would mention, both the people that understood English and those that didn't. And the people that said that they didn't understand English said that they almost appreciated it more because they were kind of forced into focusing and paying so much attention. Whereas they were saying that if you know the language of the piece, you can tune out. You can stop looking because you can hear it. So you can like look down or like look around or like get distracted for a moment because you can just pay along attention with the sound of it. But so they were saying because they didn't have that, they were so sub-focused on every movement that was happening on stage. The sound effect is not like so much like chimes or what have you of like an effect. It's more of a sound, really is a soundscape. That with the focus, they were part of the production, and they were saying that. So a lot of what came out of the talkbacks, were not only questions of like pre-done questions, but questions that came from like what they would share. So we would start off with like, how are you feeling right now? Like, what was this experience of writing this bucket list? But depending on their answers, we would I would adapt it personally and like be really curious about like, okay, you're speaking so much about the effect of this bucket list, but will you go home and change something in your life? Will you actually leave this performance and leave this experience and do something different, live a little differently? Or will you go and do exactly what, because a lot of the conversations were about how we're all go, 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 go. We have our 8 p.m. meeting and then our 8 a.m. meeting followed by our 10 a.m. class followed by a 2 p.m. lunch with our friend that we have to run early from to go to our, we have the go, go, go. And so I was asking them, but you say this, but will you change? And honestly, the biggest response that I saw was one of the girls that were in our workshops. She was saying, I won't specifically change what I do, but I'll change how I do it. She was talking in regard to her family, and she may not make more time, or because she may not be able to make more time with her family, but when she is with them, she will put away her phone. She will actually try to be present and be there and experience what she is experiencing. And that I thought was the biggest takeaway, because I asked that question and like, you should go home and go spend more time with your family and change exactly how you live your life, but that's such a big question to ask of people. So to hear an actual response that was not what I intended, but was what actually I intended, was very powerful. Yeah.
And it's, people stayed, like they just stayed and stayed and stayed. Many groupings of discussions happened, and then people would go out afterward. It would be hours. It would just, these conversations went on for hours. I'm still receiving emails from people and ongoing conversations. So it was very touching. And then this is not specifically related to the piece, but I think related to the piece. It's a little silly anecdote, but I don't know if any of you know about Yoruba Santeria religion and practice. It's the Afro-Brazilian, it kind of came from slave origins, very spiritual practices. So the last night that we were there, some people that had come to the performance invited us to go to a very special place in Rio to hear some music, and it was a very special place where people seriously prepare for Carnival, and a lot of samba music, and there was just something about certain people arriving dressed in white and the way the band was singing, and their first song in Santeria Yoruba, they have these gods, they call them orishas, and one of them is Shango, and I started hearing them name off these orishas as homage as they began their music set, and I said, oh my God, these are Santeria practitioners. And so, we're just standing there politely listening to the music, and but then I just said, I don't really know how to samba, but I want to. And I went up to one of these guys, like looked like he was one of the central guys, and I said, I don't know how to samba, but I really want you to teach me. And it ends up that this guy he channels Shango, and he's like, yeah, sure, right. And so I get onto this floor with him. I actually have a picture on my phone if you want to see it. And he, I don't know what he did to me, but he did something in regards to like death and life, and I just followed him. Thank God I had come from a dance background originally, and we danced for a long time, and I got accepted into the group somehow, and he gave me some really strong gifts, and I thought that was actually the best way to put a period at the end of this fabulous journey that the IPCCR provided for us, and hopefully we will keep putting out seeds from what our experience was there.
Thank you. So it is after 4, but